ultimate Dark Lord of Middle-earth? Was it Morgoth, the original Dark Power whose malice scarred Arda itself and ignited the wars of the First Age? Or was it Sauron, the cunning and calculated servant who rose to dominate Middle-earth for centuries, leaving behind an unforgettable legacy of terror? For Tolkien fans, this question echoes through the ages, stirring debates and intrigue. Both Morgoth and Sauron cast shadows over Middle-earth, yet they wielded their power in ways as different as they were dark. Welcome to Tales of the Ring, where we dive into the rich, intricate lore of Middle-earth to uncover the hidden mysteries and profound stories behind Tolkien's characters. Today, we're unraveling the tale of two of Tolkien's most infamous villains. By examining their darkest deeds, we'll see how Morgoth, once known as Melkor, transformed from the mightiest of the Ainur into a force of pure chaos. And then there is Sauron, his most loyal servant, who, after Morgoth's fall, set out on a quest to bring Middle-earth to its knees. In this episode, we'll explore the layers of power and corruption that define these two Dark Lords, from Morgoth's hunger to destroy and control all things, to Sauron's ambition to dominate and manipulate. To truly understand Middle-earth's dark legacy, we must first understand its darkest roots. Passionate about exploring Tolkien's mythos, please like, subscribe, and join us on this journey to our first 1,000 subscribers. Together, we'll explore every corner of Middle-earth, uncovering the secrets, shadows, and stories that make this world as enchanting as it is dark. Before Middle-earth ever knew the shadow of Sauron, there was Melkor, the mightiest of the Ainur. Melkor's origins are rooted in the very creation of Ea, the universe itself. Crafted by Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme being, the Ainur were spirits of immense power, each with unique gifts and purposes. Among them, Melkor stood supreme, embodying both raw strength and boundless potential. But his story is not one of simple power. It is one of ambition and tragic rebellion. Melkor's restlessness and ambition. From the beginning, Melkor's spirit was restless, driven by a curiosity unmatched by any of his kin, while the other Ainur took joy in serving Ilúvatar, harmonizing their thoughts in the great music of the Ainur. Melkor's thoughts strayed. Unlike his brethren, Melkor longed for independence delved into the depths of space, seeking the flame imperishable, the source of life and creation, known only to Iluvatar. He believed that if he could harness this mysterious flame, he too could create beings of his own and bend existence to his desires. However, this hunger set him on a dark path. While the other Ainur harmonized to Iluvatar's music, Melkor began weaving his own discordant notes, sowing chaos into the very foundation of creation. He wished not only to rule over creation, but to dominate it. This marked the beginning of his descent into corruption, setting the stage for the discord that would echo through all ages. The birth of darkness, Melkor's rebellion. When Eru Iluvatar revealed Arda, the world that would become Middle-earth, Melkor's envy and lust for control grew. The Valar, other mighty Ainur like Manwë, Varda, and Aule, descended to shape Arda into a paradise of beauty and balance. But Melkor saw this world as something to be conquered and bent to his will. Thus he descended as well, but not to create or nurture. He came to subjugate and corrupt. From the moment he set foot in Arda, Melkor's acts grew darker. He began to distort the creations of the Valar, filling the seas with storms, cracking the earth, and plunging entire lands into shadow. His every action was a rejection of the beauty the Valar sought to preserve. Where they built, he sought to tear down. Where they nurtured, he sought to poison. Over time, his influence spread, and the Valar struggled to combat his endless destruction. Yet despite his malice, he was not yet the Morgoth we would come to know. The creation of Angband and the unyielding shadow. One of Melkor's most significant creations was Angband, a fortress in the north of Arda, a place of unyielding darkness where he could consolidate his power. With Angband, Melkor laid the foundation for his tyranny, a fortress that would become a symbol of dread across Middle-earth. Angband, built as a secondary fortress to Utono, became the ultimate stronghold for Melkor and his growing army of dark creatures. Within its iron walls, he gathered servants of all kinds, including Dark Maiar, who would come to serve him loyally. Among them was Sauron, who would rise as his most cunning and dedicated servant. Angband became not just a physical fortress, but the heart of Melkor's rebellion, a lair from which he could lash out at the Valar's creations and darken all lands under his influence. As his power solidified, so too did his title. Melkor became known as Morgoth, which means the black foe of the world. The Ainur, who had once been his kin, saw him now as their sworn enemy. The war against the Valar. Morgoth's rise incited a war of cosmic proportions. The Valar, realizing that his presence in Arda threatened to corrupt and destroy all life, launched an assault on his strongholds. Their battle against Morgoth was fierce, and his first fortress, Utumno, was finally laid waste after intense conflict. However, Morgoth managed to escape the full consequences of defeat. Though chained and dragged to Valinor for judgment, his spirit burned with vengeance. For 3 ages, he was imprisoned by the Valar, but his hatred only deepened, growing colder and darker with each passing year. Eventually, he was released, and while he feigned repentance,
Dieser tragbare Warmluftblaster wird bis 2026 in jedem Haushalt in der Schweiz zu finden sein. Er kann einen
his ambitions remained as fierce as ever. His initial rebellion against Iluvatar had transformed into a relentless drive to corrupt all beauty, to control the very fabric of Middle-earth itself. his heart, he still craved dominion over all existence, and he would stop at nothing to achieve it. Morgoth's corruption of creation. What made Morgoth's malice truly fearsome was his insidious corruption of creation itself. Morgoth was not content with simply conquering lands. He wanted to mar the very essence of life in Arda. He distorted creatures to create orcs, twisted in mockery of the children of Iluvatar. He bred trolls, dragons, and other abominations, beings that would serve his dark purposes and spread terror wherever they went. Unlike Sauron, whose methods were primarily rooted in domination and fear, Morgoth's evil was far more primal. He aimed to disrupt the natural order, leaving lasting scars on Middle-earth. Every corner of Arda bore his stain. Each sea he darkened, each mountain he defiled, each forest he marred. His malice was woven into the very fabric of the land, corrupting it in ways that could not be undone. The endless impact of Morgoth's influence. Although Morgoth was eventually defeated and cast out of the world, his influence remained embedded within Arda. The wounds he inflicted on Middle-earth would never fully heal, marking him as the dark force that shaped the land itself. His creation, Angband, would stand as a dark legacy, remembered by elves and men for ages to come. His hatred had scarred not only the physical world, but the hearts of its people, inciting wars, divisions, and tragedies. While Sauron would later rise to power, Morgoth had left an imprint that went beyond armies or rings of power. He had altered the destiny of Arda, embedding his dark legacy into the very essence of the world. His lust for power, his rebellion against Iluvatar, and his hatred of the Valar shaped Middle-earth in ways that not even Sauron, for all his cunning, could match. Morgoth's evil was elemental, a darkness that would forever linger, casting a shadow over all future ages. With his influence, Morgoth transformed the beauty of creation into something dangerous, sparking conflicts that would resonate through all ages. In our next section, we will see how this groundwork laid by Morgoth enabled Sauron to emerge, ultimately claiming the mantle of Dark Lord for himself. As Morgoth spread his shadow across Arda, sowing chaos and darkness, a new figure would rise beside him, one who would leave his own indelible mark on Middle-earth long after Morgoth's defeat. This was Mairon, later known as Sauron, a being with ambitions as dark as his masters, but with methods far more subtle and insidious. Mairon, the bright servant of Ale. Before he became the Dark Lord we know, Sauron was Mairon, a Maya of incredible skill and intellect. Created by Eru Iluvatar, Mairon's purpose, like all Maiar, was to serve the Valar, the greater Ainur, in crafting and guiding Arda. Mairon was especially drawn to Ale the Smith, the Vala of craftsmanship and creation. Under Ale's guidance, Mairon honed his gifts, developing an unparalleled mastery over the arts of creation, order, and precision. Ale valued knowledge and structure, traits Mairon admired deeply. From Ale, Mairon learned the arts of making and building, skills that he would later pervert in his quest for dominance. He was not interested in brute force. Rather, he desired order, structure, and efficiency. Mairon believed that with the right power, he could shape a flawless world. But this obsession with order sowed the seeds of his downfall, creating a vulnerability that Morgoth would soon exploit. The allure of Morgoth and the turn to darkness. Unlike Morgoth, who from the beginning desired to rule Arda in rebellion against Iluvatar, Mehran's fall was gradual. He was drawn to order, to the notion that with enough control, he could create a world without the chaos he saw around him. Morgoth saw this ambition and seized the opportunity to corrupt him. Sensing that Mehran's desire for control could easily turn dark, Morgoth reached out to him, whispering promises of power beyond the restraints of Aule's teachings. Mehran's dedication to order transformed into an obsession with domination. Morgoth convinced him that true order could only be achieved through total control, that freedom was an obstacle, and that those who resisted should be brought under a single will. Gradually, Mehran's loyalty shifted from Aule to Morgoth. He began to see his master as the only being strong enough to bring unity to Arda through force, and he pledged himself to Morgoth's service, becoming the lieutenant of Morgoth. Under Morgoth, Mehran abandoned his former name, taking on the mantle of Sauron, meaning the abhorred. As Morgoth's trusted lieutenant, Sauron became an architect of dread, using fear and deceit rather than open conflict. Unlike Morgoth, whose power manifested in raw destruction, Sauron's approach was strategic. He understood that subtlety could be as effective as brute strength, and he used his skills to manipulate, deceive, and control. Sauron became Morgoth's master of deception, the dark mind behind many of Morgoth's more complex schemes. While Morgoth led his legions into battle and darkened the world through destruction, Sauron focused on seduction and trickery. He delved into the arcane arts, becoming a master of sorcery and illusion. Through Sauron's influence, Morgoth's forces grew in strength and cunning, and their corruption spread like a poison across Middle-earth. The unique approach of Sauron, domination through order. While Morgoth's malice was fueled by chaos and destruction, Sauron's was more deliberate. Sauron did not seek mere devastation. He sought absolute control. Where Morgoth corrupted through force, Sauron aimed to manipulate, to sow seeds of dependence and despair, bending others' wills to his own. This distinctive approach allowed Sauron to exploit his enemies' weaknesses, turning allies into foes and friends into slaves. His mind was sharp, his ambition clear, a world united under his rule, purged of the unpredictability that he despised. In Morgoth's dark fortress of Angband, Sauron learned to channel his power through fear and subjugation. He commanded vast armies of orcs, trolls, and other monstrous creatures, but he also worked in subtler ways, spreading his influence among elves, men, and other free peoples. Sauron became the unseen force that drove Morgoth's will, a shadow within a shadow, whose mastery of deception and manipulation would become the foundation of his future reign. The legacy of the Seal Maurillians and Sauron's lust for power. During his time as Morgoth's servant, Sauron became aware of the Silmarils, the 3 radiant jewels crafted by Feanor. These jewels, which contained the light of the 2 trees, were coveted by Morgoth and stolen by him as symbols of his defiance against the Valar. But they were more than mere jewels. The Silmarils represented untamed beauty and the freedom of creation, concepts that Sauron both admired and sought to control. He watched as Morgoth's obsession with the Silmarils led to devastating wars and the corruption of countless souls. Sauron understood that such objects of power could be tools for control, and the seeds for his future ambitions were sown. Where Morgoth had taken the Silmarils with raw power, Sauron saw a path to control through subtle influence. This would be a lesson he would carry into the Second Age, where he would wield the power of the One Ring to bend others to his will, in a twisted echo of Morgoth's own lust for the Silmarils. Sauron's rise to independent power. Even as he served Morgoth, Sauron envisioned a future beyond mere servitude. He was aware that Morgoth's sheer force and chaos were bound to attract resistance from the Valar and the free peoples of Arda. In his mind, Sauron harbored his own ambitions, ones he would pursue if Morgoth were ever defeated. He knew that if he could seize control after his master's fall, he could shape a world in his own vision, a vision of absolute order, with himself as its ruler, Sauron's legacy and future reign. With his master gone, Sauron embarked on a new path. He would not seek to reshape Middle-earth through raw force, as Morgoth had done, but would instead corrupt from within, bending minds and wills to his purpose. Sauron's vision of domination through order would culminate in the forging of the One Ring, his ultimate tool of control, a weapon of subtler but equally devastating power compared to Morgoth's wrath. Sauron's rise as the Dark Lord would mark a new era of darkness, one where treachery and deception became as feared as fire and steel. In the next section, we'll see how Morgoth's reign of terror came to a brutal end.
Welches Organ ist für die Gewichtsabnahme am wichtigsten? Überraschenderweise ist es die Leber.
Paving the way for Sauron to take the mantle of Dark Lord and shape Middle-earth in his image. As Morgoth descended further into darkness, his ambition grew boundless, and his malevolence swept over Arda like an unending storm. His desire for dominance and destruction led to some of the most infamous deeds in the history of Middle-earth, acts so horrific they would scar the world and its people for ages to come. Morgoth's hatred was not limited to any single target. He sought to taint everything beautiful, to twist every act of creation into something unrecognizable. His darkest deeds laid the foundation of evil that would haunt Middle-earth long after his defeat. The blighting of the two trees. In Valinor, the realm of the Valar, stood two of the most cherished symbols of beauty and light in Arda, Telperion and Lorelin, the two trees. These trees, created by Yavanna, radiated a light more brilliant than the sun or moon, illuminating the blessed realm with a splendor unmatched in all of creation. They were more than trees. They were symbols of harmony, a balance between the powers of light and life, a reminder of the Valar's protection over Arda. But Morgoth, consumed by jealousy and bitterness, yearned to extinguish this radiance. After escaping his imprisonment in Valinor, he allied himself with Ungoliant, a creature of darkness and insatiable hunger. Together they journeyed to the trees, and Morgoth drove his spear into them, allowing Ungoliant to drink their light. The trees withered and died, casting Valinor into darkness. This act of pure destruction was Morgoth's way of declaring that nothing beautiful or sacred would remain untouched by his malice. The loss of the two trees sent shockwaves through Valinor, plunging the Valar and the elves into despair. It was not just an attack on beauty, but on the very essence of Arda. Morgoth had defiled what was once untouchable, proving that his hatred knew no boundaries. The theft of the Silmarils. In addition to destroying the two trees, Morgoth craved the Silmarils, 3 jewels created by Fëanor, the greatest craftsman among the Noldor elves. These jewels held within them the last remnants of the light of the two trees, preserved in a form so pure and radiant that even the hands of the Valar could not touch them without burning. To Morgoth, these Silmarils symbolized ultimate beauty, a beauty he despised, yet could not resist coveting. He saw in them the power to mock and torment the elves, particularly Fëanor, whose pride and brilliance were unmatched. Under cover of the darkness he had unleashed, Morgoth stole the Silmarils from Fëanor's vault. He fled with the jewels, returning to Angband, where he placed them in an iron crown upon his head. The Silmarils burned against his flesh, yet he wore them as trophies, defiant symbols of his triumph over the Valar and elves. This theft was more than an act of greed. It was an act of vengeance, a way for Morgoth to assert his supremacy and defile something sacred to his enemies. The loss of the Silmarils would haunt Fëanor, igniting a relentless pursuit and sparking conflicts that would shape the First Age. The Curse of Fëanor and the Wars of the Jewels. The theft of the Silmarils shattered the Noldor, leading Fëanor to make a vow that would cast a shadow over all his descendants. In a furious oath, Fëanor and his sons vowed to pursue anyone who held the Silmarils, even if it meant spilling innocent blood. This curse, born of pride and grief, bound the Noldor to a path of unyielding conflict, known as the Wars of the Jewels. The Noldor pursued Morgoth to Middle-earth, determined to reclaim the Silmarils. What followed were centuries of brutal warfare between Morgoth's armies and the Noldor, a series of clashes that would claim countless lives and ravage entire regions. Morgoth's influence grew as he unleashed terrible forces upon his foes. His fortresses Utumno and later Angband became the source of his dark power, spawning orcs, balrogs, and other monstrous creatures that he bent to his will. Morgoth's wars against elves and men. Morgoth's hatred did not discriminate. With each passing year, his assaults grew fiercer, his armies larger. He dispatched hordes of orcs, twisted creatures who served as his foot soldiers, terrorizing elves and men alike. Yet it was not only orcs that fought in his name. Morgoth also commanded balrogs, fiery demons of shadow and flame, each capable of immense destruction. These dark Maiar, once servants of the Valar, had been seduced by Morgoth and now served as his most formidable lieutenants. The corruption of men. While the elves bore the brunt of Morgoth's fury, men were not spared from his influence. Morgoth saw in men a potential to sow even greater discord. Unlike the elves, men were more vulnerable to temptation and manipulation, and Morgoth exploited this weakness. He twisted their ambitions, convincing some that he alone could grant them power and dominion. Many fell under his shadow, serving him as soldiers and traitors against their own kind. This sowed a divide between elves and men that would linger for centuries as distrust and betrayal festered. Morgoth's corruption of men was a deliberate act of manipulation as he sought to pit the races of Middle-earth against one another. By turning men against the elves, Morgoth ensured that even after his eventual defeat, his influence would linger, poisoning alliances and friendships, perpetuating a cycle of fear and division. The final confrontation with Fëanor. Among Morgoth's most iconic enemies was Fëanor, the very elf whose Silmarils he had stolen. Fëanor, driven by fury and vengeance, led the Noldor in a direct assault on Morgoth's forces. Though his wrath and bravery were unparalleled, he met his fate at the hands of Morgoth's Balrogs. In a battle that epitomized the tragic downfall of pride, Fëanor fell, his body consumed by flame. His death marked a turning point in the conflict, as the Noldor now faced the reality that Morgoth's might was beyond any individual's power to overcome. Fëanor's legacy, however, lived on through his sons, who continued the pursuit of the Silmarils, perpetuating the curse he had set in motion. The quest to reclaim the Silmarils became a bitter struggle that saw brother turn against brother, friend against friend, all under the shadow of Morgoth's corruption. Morgoth's influence on Middle-earth. Morgoth's reach extended beyond armies and battles. He defiled the very fabric of Middle-earth, spreading darkness that could not easily be undone. His hand lay behind every act of treachery, every broken alliance, every act of despair that plagued the land. His corruption was woven into the earth itself, marring forests, rivers, and mountains. Morgoth did not merely seek to rule, he aimed to desecrate, to erase beauty and replace it with fear. Through these heinous deeds, Morgoth's malevolence became a force that transcended time, echoing across the ages. The First Age closed with his eventual capture and banishment, but his influence would persist, haunting Middle-earth even in the Second and Third Ages. His apprentice, Sauron, learned much from him, but Sauron would never quite replicate the sheer scale of Morgoth's devastation. After the banishment of Morgoth, Sauron emerged from the shadows to fill the void left by his fallen master. No longer the lieutenant, he set his sights on claiming Middle-earth as his own. The One Ring symbolized Sauron's insatiable need for control, a relic of his days under Morgoth but magnified by his own ambition. It was both a weapon and a weakness, binding him to its fate. Sauron's power grew immeasurably, but as his strength became entwined with the One Ring, he became increasingly vulnerable to its destruction. The domination of Middle-earth and the War of the Last Alliance. With the power of the One Ring, Sauron's dominion spread across Middle-earth. He consolidated his forces in Mordor, where he constructed the Dark Tower of Barad-dûr as his seat of power. From Mordor, Sauron launched campaigns of terror, commanding orcs, trolls, and other dark creatures, instilling fear throughout Middle-earth. He extended his influence to men of the East and South who fell under his shadow, while the free peoples, the elves, dwarves, and some factions of men, struggled to resist his tyranny. As Sauron's strength grew, so did his arrogance. Believing himself unstoppable, he sought to bring all of Middle-earth under his rule. This ambition led to one of the most monumental confrontations in the history of Middle-earth, the War of the Last Alliance. The elves, led by Gil-galad and Elendil, king of the Dúnedain, united their forces to challenge Sauron's reign. This alliance represented the last hope for Middle-earth to remain free from his shadow. The two armies clashed on the fields of Dagorlad, where countless lives were lost in a brutal and relentless struggle. The Last Alliance laid siege to Barad-dûr itself, determined to destroy Sauron once and for all. The final confrontation occurred on the slopes of Mount Doom, where Sauron himself emerged to face Gil-galad and Elendil. In a desperate battle, both Elendil and Gil-galad fell, but Isildur, Elendil's son, managed to strike Sauron with the broken remains of his father's sword, severing the One Ring from his hand, a temporary defeat and enduring presence. With the One Ring severed from him, Sauron's physical form was destroyed, and his power seemed to wane. Yet his spirit endured, tied to the ring that Isildur claimed as his own. Despite the pleas of Elrond and Círdan to destroy the ring, Isildur chose to keep it, blinded by its allure. This decision proved to be a fatal mistake, for the ring held a will of its own, bound to Sauron's essence. As long as the ring existed, Sauron's spirit would endure, waiting for the chance to rise again. Over the centuries, Sauron's presence remained a dark whisper in Middle-earth. The ring passed out of memory, but Sauron's influence lingered. He lay dormant, rebuilding his strength in secret until he could take shape once more. The Third Age and Sauron's reemergence. By the Third Age, Sauron's shadow began to grow again. He adopted the title of the Necromancer, residing in the fortress of Dol Guldur in southern Northrend. Here, he slowly regained power, clouding the minds of men and spreading fear. His servants, the Nazgûl, ringwraiths enslaved by the 9 rings he had given to kings of men, re-emerged as his heralds, spreading terror across the lands. The Free Peoples, unaware of his true identity, were caught off guard by his resurgence. It wasn't until Gandalf the Grey uncovered the truth that the White Council realized the Necromancer was in fact Sauron. Though he was driven from Dol Guldur, Sauron returned to Mordor, rebuilding Barad-dûr and preparing for his ultimate conquest of Middle-earth, the quest for the One Ring and Sauron's final war. With his power restored, Sauron's focus turned to reclaiming the One Ring, for without it, his strength was diminished. His search for the ring drove the events of the Third Age, leading to the fateful journey of Frodo Baggins and the Fellowship of the Ring. Sauron's forces, orcs, trolls, the Nazgûl, and legions of men under his influence, prepared for a full-scale assault on the free lands. The War of the Ring became the culmination of his centuries-long quest for total domination. The ultimate confrontation came not on the battlefield, but at the very heart of Mount Doom, where Frodo's quest reached its climax. In an act of fate and resilience, the One Ring was destroyed, shattering Sauron's power forever. With its destruction, Sauron's spirit was finally obliterated, ending his dark reign over Middle-earth. Legacy of Sauron's rule. Though Sauron was defeated, his influence left a lasting impact on Middle-earth. His cunning, manipulation, and lust for control had driven kingdoms to ruin and tested the resilience of the Free Peoples. The memory of his reign served as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and the dangers of yielding to darkness. His legacy, though broken, would be remembered as a shadow upon the land, a symbol of how even the smallest act of deception can ripple across ages. As we look deeper into the darkness of Middle-earth's most infamous antagonists, Morgoth and Sauron, we see that each pursued power in vastly different ways. Though Sauron learned much from Morgoth as his lieutenant, the methods and motivations that defined each Dark Lord reveal 2 unique forms of evil. Morgoth embodied raw, unrestrained chaos and destruction, while Sauron wielded a more methodical, manipulative evil, seeking domination through order and fear. This distinction not only shaped their respective reigns, but also left a lasting impact on Middle-earth and its history. Morgoth's corruption of creation. Morgoth, originally named Melkor, was the most powerful of the Ainur created by Eru Ilúvatar, gifted with immense strength and skill. Yet from the beginning, he was driven by envy and pride, desiring not only power, but the ability to create as Eru did. Unlike Sauron, Morgoth's ambition was not simply to rule or to dominate. It was to corrupt and defile the very fabric of creation. Morgoth's evil was driven by a hatred for all that was beautiful and harmonious, an impulse to destroy rather than to control. In his desire to bend Arda to his will, Morgoth inflicted deep wounds upon the world itself. He marred the land, poisoned its waters, and twisted its creatures into instruments of darkness. His influence was not limited to armies or fortresses, but extended into the essence of Arda itself. The foul creatures he created, orcs, dragons, and balrogs, were twisted mockeries of Eru's creations. This drive to corrupt went beyond personal ambition. Morgoth sought to reshape Arda in his own image of chaos and decay. Sauron's quest for order and control. Sauron, on the other hand, began as Mehran, a Maya devoted to Aule, the Vala of craftsmanship and order. Initially, he was not driven by chaos or destruction, but by an intense desire for order, structure, and perfection. Sauron valued precision and control, which made him an excellent servant under Aule's guidance. However, as he became enamored with the idea of imposing his version of order upon all of Middle-earth, he grew increasingly authoritarian. This desire for domination through structured rule became the foundation of his descent into darkness. Unlike Morgoth, whose approach was brute force and destruction, Sauron's methods were far more strategic and manipulative. He sought to win the allegiance of others, even if it meant using deceit and persuasion rather than force alone. His disguise as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, revealed this aspect of his nature. By approaching the elves of Eregion under the guise of friendship and mentorship, he managed to forge the Rings of Power, a plan to control Middle-earth from within. Sauron's vision was not merely to conquer, but to establish a system where all would serve under his rule, willingly or not. This vision of order through domination became the foundation of his rule over Mordor and his later attempts to extend his influence through the One Ring. The contrast of destruction versus domination. Morgoth's reign can best be described as a campaign of chaos. His wars, assaults, and relentless drive to corrupt the natural world created an atmosphere of unbridled terror. He didn't seek loyalty or fealty. He only wanted to break his enemies and reshape the world in his twisted vision. The destruction of the two trees of Valinor and the theft of the Silmarils were symbolic of Morgoth's approach. He desired to possess beauty, but not to preserve it. His acts of evil were almost primal, a raw and uncontainable darkness that disrupted the order of creation itself. In stark contrast, Sauron's approach was rooted in control and manipulation. Where Morgoth broke and burned, Sauron schemed and subjugated. He forged alliances, influenced the hearts of men, and established Mordor as a structured realm under his absolute rule. His strategy centered on subverting his enemies rather than simply obliterating them. His creation of the One Ring encapsulated this philosophy. The ring was a tool to bind the wills of others, allowing him to control them from afar. His power lay not in sheer destruction, but in a calculated dominance that twisted others to serve his ends. This fundamental difference in their approaches can be seen in the way each interacted with other races. Morgoth relied on overwhelming force, sending forth armies of orcs and balrogs, creatures created purely for warfare. Sauron, however, invested in manipulating men, particularly the Númenóreans, turning their hearts against the Valar and eventually leading to the downfall of Númenor. Morgoth broke his enemies, but Sauron sought to enslave them, viewing Middle-earth as a vast mechanism under his control. The unique nature of their evils.
Warum ist ein Löwe eigentlich nie zum Physio? Hier haben wir allein in Deutschland über 15 Millionen chronische Schmerzpatienten. Weil der Löwe
Morgoth and Sauron's differing philosophies shaped the way their evil manifested in the world. Morgoth's chaos was deeply embedded in Arda's very essence, and his influence would leave lasting scars. His touch corrupted the land, turning once beautiful places into wastelands. By poisoning the essence of Middle-earth, he ensured that his shadow would linger even after his defeat. Sauron's evil, however, was highly personal and relational. Rather than corrupting the earth itself, he focused on the corruption of hearts and minds. His creation of the ring-wraiths, for instance, demonstrated his capacity to ensnare others, turning mighty kings into enslaved wraiths, bound to his will. His darkness spread not through the land, but through influence and subversion, making his evil more insidious and harder to root out. This contrast extends even to their followers. Morgoth's servants were twisted and corrupted creatures of darkness, bound to his will through fear or sheer evil. Sauron's followers included men, who chose to follow him for promises of power or longevity, a more complex and ultimately tragic allegiance that speaks to Sauron's manipulative nature. The legacy of Morgoth's and Sauron's evils. The legacy of Morgoth's evil is that of an enduring shadow upon Middle-earth, a stain that would never truly fade. His impact is seen in the creatures he created, the desolation he wrought, and the fear he instilled across the ages. His influence was so vast that even after his defeat, remnants of his malice persisted in creatures like the Balrogs and the corrupted lands of Middle-earth. Morgoth's legacy was one of chaos and corruption, the decay of beauty and the perversion of life. Sauron's legacy, however, was one of subjugation and control. His influence lingered in the hearts of men, and the fear he instilled would last beyond his final defeat. The One Ring, even after its destruction, remained a symbol of temptation and the desire for power, a reminder of how deeply Sauron had impacted Middle-earth's history. His approach was more nuanced but equally destructive, an evil that spread like a shadow, unseen but deeply felt. Reflections on their different paths. Ultimately, Morgoth and Sauron represent two facets of evil that Tolkien explored throughout his legendarium. Morgoth's evil was raw and untamable, while Sauron's was cold, calculated, and deeply psychological. Each left an indelible mark upon Middle-earth, but in very different ways. Morgoth's chaotic destruction and Sauron's authoritarian manipulation exemplify the varying forms that darkness can take, showing that evil, like power, can manifest in different shapes. While Morgoth's raw malice seemed unstoppable, it was Sauron's cunning and deceit that proved harder to resist. Morgoth's fall was inevitable, his desire for unrestrained power ultimately leading to his banishment. Sauron, on the other hand, lingered far longer, weaving his darkness into the very minds of his followers. A darkness that would not be extinguished until the One Ring was finally destroyed. Exploring what-if scenarios between Middle-earth's two Dark Lords, Morgoth and Sauron, opens up a fascinating world of speculation. Though Sauron learned under Morgoth and followed in his path of conquest and control, they had unique limitations and strengths, which would have impacted the balance of power if history had played out differently. What if Sauron had achieved the power of Morgoth, or if Morgoth had returned in the Third Age? These scenarios allow us to explore the boundaries of their powers and how they could have altered the fate of Middle-earth. The legacy of Morgoth's and Sauron's evils. The legacy of Morgoth's evil is that of an enduring shadow upon Middle-earth, a stain that would never truly fade. His impact is seen in the creatures he created, the desolation he wrought, and the fear he instilled across the ages. His influence was so vast that even after his defeat, remnants of his malice persisted in creatures like the Balrogs and the corrupted lands of Middle-earth. Morgoth's legacy was one of chaos and corruption, the decay of beauty and the perversion of life. Sauron's legacy, however, was one of subjugation and control. His influence lingered in the hearts of men, and the fear he instilled would last beyond his final defeat. The One Ring, even after its destruction, remained a symbol of temptation and the desire for power, a reminder of how deeply Sauron had impacted Middle-earth's history. His approach was more nuanced but equally destructive, an evil that spread like a shadow, unseen but deeply felt. Reflections on their different paths. Ultimately, Morgoth and Sauron represent two facets of evil that Tolkien explored throughout his legendarium. Morgoth's evil was raw and untamable, while Sauron's was cold, calculated, and deeply psychological. Each left an indelible mark upon Middle-earth, but in very different ways. Morgoth's chaotic destruction and Sauron's authoritarian manipulation exemplify the varying forms that darkness can take, showing that evil, like power, can manifest in different shapes. While Morgoth's raw malice seemed unstoppable, it was Sauron's cunning and deceit that proved harder to resist. Morgoth's fall was inevitable, his desire for unrestrained power ultimately leading to his banishment. Sauron, on the other hand, lingered far longer, weaving his darkness into the very minds of his followers, a darkness that would not be extinguished until the One Ring was finally destroyed. Exploring what-if scenarios between Middle-earth's two Dark Lords, Morgoth and Sauron, opens up a fascinating world of speculation. Though Sauron learned under Morgoth and followed in his path of conquest and control, they had unique limitations and strengths, which would have impacted the balance of power if history had played out differently. What if Sauron had achieved the power of Morgoth, or if Morgoth had returned in the Third Age? These scenarios allow us to explore the boundaries of their powers and how they could have altered the fate of Middle-earth. If Sauron had attained Morgoth's level of strength, he might have dominated Middle-earth with even greater ease. Sauron's genius lay in manipulation and control, something he mastered in a way Morgoth never did. With Morgoth's raw power and Sauron's talent for subtle deception, he could have had an empire that stretched across the entirety of Arda, perhaps even challenging the Valar themselves. His influence over men, the elves, and even creatures of darkness like the Balrogs could have extended into every corner of Middle-earth, turning it into a nightmarish domain completely subjugated to his will. Sauron's One Ring, already a terrifying artifact in Middle-earth, would have had far more devastating effects if imbued with the force of a Valar. While the ring already amplified his abilities and controlled the other rings, imagine if its influence could corrupt entire regions of Arda with its sheer potency. Entire forests, rivers, and even mountains could have become twisted under his control. Instead of being limited to enslaving creatures and bending nations to his will, Sauron might have reshaped Arda itself, creating a world molded by his vision of order through domination. What if Morgoth returned in the Third Age? If Morgoth had somehow returned to Middle-earth during the Third Age, the Free Peoples would have faced an apocalyptic challenge. Morgoth's unrestrained hatred for all life and beauty, paired with his raw power as a Valar, would have brought unimaginable destruction. Unlike Sauron, who sought to rule, Morgoth had no interest in control or civilization. He wanted to annihilate. His return would have likely led to the obliteration of entire civilizations, and his twisted creations, such as Balrogs and dragons, would have razed Middle-earth to the ground. Middle-earth's heroes, such as Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, might have united to resist Morgoth, yet even their combined power would struggle to withstand the fury of a returned Dark Lord. Morgoth's return would also mean the release of ancient horrors he'd left behind. Balrogs hidden in dark places and other creations of his that had faded into legend could have rallied to his call, overwhelming Middle-earth with a flood of dark forces. Even the races of men would have been vulnerable to Morgoth's corruption, as we saw during the rise and fall of Númenor under Sauron's influence. If Morgoth returned, it's likely that the Valar themselves would have intervened again, potentially repeating the War of Wrath, which had originally cast Morgoth into the void. However, the devastation caused by such a conflict would have been enormous, likely erasing all life on Arda as collateral damage. This intervention, while possibly saving Middle-earth, would have left it scarred beyond recognition, a landscape bereft of its former beauty and harmony. Could Sauron have surpassed Morgoth's power over time? While Morgoth was a being of immense strength, his downfall lay in his unrestrained aggression and recklessness. Morgoth spread his power thin, infusing it into creatures like the orcs and Balrogs, and into the very land of Middle-earth. Over time, this dispersion of power weakened him, leaving him vulnerable to the combined might of the Valar and the armies of the Free Peoples. Sauron, however, pursued a more concentrated path to power. He invested his essence into the One Ring, a single artifact that could have granted him complete dominion. If Sauron had been given enough time, could he have eventually surpassed Morgoth? Some believe it's possible. Sauron's strength lay in his patience, his cunning, and his careful planning. Unlike Morgoth, Sauron didn't immediately seek to conquer. He sought to corrupt and control slowly, allowing his influence to seep into every corner of Middle-earth. Had he succeeded in reclaiming the One Ring during the Third Age, his strength would have been unparalleled. The power of the One Ring allowed Sauron to influence others from afar, corrupting even the hearts of the noble. This indirect approach meant that Sauron's reach was wide, and had he regained the ring, he might have mastered an influence that even Morgoth never achieved, a psychological grip on the hearts and minds of Middle-earth. His rule, therefore, would not only have been enforced by power, but also by the complete submission of the free peoples to his will, creating a realm of willing servants rather than reluctant captives.
Dieses unglaubliche Gerät kann mit deinem Smartphone atemberaubende High-Definition-Bilder aus meilenweiter Entfernung aufnehmen. Es ist so leicht, dass es in deine Tasche passt. Hier ist der Grund, warum professionelle Fotografen und Reiseblogger in den sozialen Medien ununterbrochen darüber sprechen. Seit 2014 ist die Zahl der Safari-Touristen, die von wilden Tieren verletzt wurden, von 4.000 auf bis zu 17.000 gestiegen. Experten führen diese alarmierende Zahl auf die Verbreitung von Smartphones zurück und darauf, dass Touristen damit Fotos von wilden Tieren aus gefährlicher Nähe machen. Das war der Auslöser für eine Gruppe südafrikanischer Optikingenieure, die Sache selbst in die Hand zu nehmen. Sie entdeckten, wie man Fluoridkristall nutzen kann, das gleiche Glas mit besonders geringer Dispersion, das in militärischen Beobachtungsteleskopen verwendet wird. Diese besondere Art von Glas ermöglicht es Teleskopen, Objekte aus meilenweiter Entfernung zu vergrößern und trotzdem unglaublich kristallklare Bilder zu liefern. Und nach 2 Jahren Produktentwicklung und unzähligen Beta-Tests war der Nanozoom geboren. Ein leichtes und ultrakompaktes Smartphone-Monokular, das bis zu 30 Mal mehr heranzoomen kann als herkömmliche Teleskope, die doppelt so groß sind, so dass Safari-Touristen mit ihren Handys hochauflösende Bilder von gefährlichen Tieren aus sicherer Entfernung machen können. Es ist außerdem wasserdicht und nebelfest, was es perfekt für den Einsatz im Freien macht. Und mit der eingebauten Antischock-Technologie erhältst du bei jeder Aufnahme maximale Stabilität. Blake aus Texas war im vergangenen Mai auf einer Kenia-Safari und hatte eine unvergessliche Reise. Das Beste daran war, dass er jeden kostbaren Moment mit dem Nanozoom einfangen konnte. Er fühlte sich, als wäre er direkt neben all den Tieren und Wildtieren gewesen. Das war besonders praktisch auf seiner Tour, als er kristallklare Bilder von gefährlichen Tieren machen wollte, ohne ihnen zu nahe zu kommen. Hazel ist eine begeisterte Wanderin und hält ihre Abenteuer schon seit über 17 Jahren mit DSLR-Kameras fest. Allerdings hatte sie immer Angst, ihre 4.000 € teure Ausrüstung zu beschädigen, vor allem wenn es regnete oder wenn sie durch unwegsarmes Gelände schleppte. Nachdem sie auf Nanozoom umgestiegen ist, kann sie jetzt bei jedem Wetter stressfrei atemberaubende Aufnahmen machen. Und das, ohne eine zerbrechliche und sperrige, 4 Pfund schwere Kamera mit sich herumschleppen zu müssen. Das Nanozoom-Monokular ist mit allen Smartphones kompatibel und super einfach zu bedienen. Befestige es einfach an deinem Smartphone und schon kannst du die Welt sehen wie nie zuvor. Seit heute geht dieses bemerkenswerte Gerät in den sozialen Medien viral. Prominente und Reiseblogger nennen es eine 4.000 € DSLR-Kamera in deiner Tasche. Und weil es mit dem Zoom und der Qualität einiger der teuersten Marken auf dem Markt mithalten kann, ist Nanozoom die erste Wahl für eine Vielzahl von Nutzern. Von Sportfans, die damit ihre Lieblingssportler auf der Tribüne aus nächster Nähe betrachten können, bis hin zu ganz normalen Menschen, die damit klare Fotos von ihren Familientreffen, Haustieren und den Gerichten, die sie zubereiten, machen und jeden Moment mit gestockten scharfen Details festhalten. Die Entwickler des Nanozoom möchten, dass so viele Menschen wie möglich von dieser neuen Technologie erfahren. Deshalb haben sie das Unmögliche möglich gemacht, um den Preis niedrig zu halten und ihn für jeden erschwinglich zu machen. Der reguläre Preis des Nanozoom liegt bei 124 €, aber heute kannst du dir einen exklusiven Rabatt von 50% sichern und den Nanozoom für nur 59 € bekommen. Wenn du dich für den Nanozoom interessierst oder jemanden mit einem einzigartigen Geschenk überraschen möchtest, klicke auf den untenstehenden Link und erhalte 50% Rabatt auf deinen Einkauf. Um den Nanozoom von den Temu und AliExpress Knockoffs zu unterscheiden, ist dieses Produkt in keinem Einzelhandelsgeschäft und auch nicht bei Amazon und eBay erhältlich. Es ist für eine begrenzte Zeit exklusiv über diesen Link erhältlich, aber du musst schnell handeln. Diese Gelegenheit ist zeitlich begrenzt und der Preis kann jeden Moment steigen, also verpasse dieses exklusive Angebot nicht. Besuche die offizielle Website und sichere dir deinen 50% Rabatt.
invested your money and can't get it back? Has your broker failed to fulfill his promises and disappeared with your savings? Don't worry, we can help. LawPro is a team of experienced lawyers specializing in recovering wrongfully withheld funds. We offer a personalized approach and professional support throughout the process. Leave the worrying of the details to us. We will ensure your matter is dealt with efficiently. Leave a request on our official website, and our experts will give you a free consultation. Trust the professionals and be sure of the result.
What if Sauron had survived after the ring's destruction? Had Sauron managed to survive the destruction of the One Ring, a hypothetical scenario given that the ring was his anchor to the physical world, his path to power would have been incredibly difficult, but not entirely impossible. Without the ring, his spirit would have been severely weakened, much like Morgoth's was after pouring his power into Arda itself. Still, if Sauron managed to endure, he might have taken an approach similar to his time as the necromancer in Dol Guldur, gradually regathering power through dark rituals and alliances. If Sauron had re-emerged post-Ring, his methods would likely have been subtler than before, focusing on influencing men and other weaker beings. In this scenario, he might not have been able to control Middle-earth directly, but could have sown seeds of corruption and discord among its rulers, destabilizing nations and fostering conflicts. He would have been a shadow of his former self, but still an insidious threat capable of undermining the peace that the destruction of the ring had achieved. What if Morgoth had forged a ring like Sauron? Morgoth's approach to power was often reckless, yet what if he had forged a central object of power like the One Ring? Had Morgoth infused his essence into a single object, he might have wielded more concentrated control over his minions, perhaps even dominating other Valar or Maiar to serve his will. This approach, while risky, could have allowed Morgoth to retain his strength more effectively, rather than dissipating it across Arda. His influence would have been sharper, and his control over his creations more absolute. However, Morgoth's very nature may have prevented him from such a calculated act. He sought to possess and corrupt all things, and may have considered focusing his power in one place as a limitation. His ambition was as boundless as his malice, and the idea of consolidating his essence into one artifact may have been too confining for his pride. In contrast, Sauron's willingness to tie his strength to the One Ring showed a pragmatic approach to control, highlighting how the two Dark Lords viewed power differently. The limits of their powers and influence. Ultimately, Morgoth and Sauron's approaches reflect their individual limitations. Morgoth's power was immense but finite, and his reckless actions caused his strength to wane over time. His desire to corrupt all things created a weakness that his enemies eventually exploited. Sauron, on the other hand, carefully honed his power and applied it strategically, creating an empire of control rather than chaos. However, his dependence on the One Ring introduced a singular vulnerability, and its destruction shattered him completely. In exploring these what-if scenarios, we see that while both Dark Lords possessed tremendous power, their choices defined their limits. Morgoth's indiscriminate malice led to his own undoing, while Sauron's focused ambition left him vulnerable to a single point of failure. In either case, Tolkien's world illustrates the inevitable downfall of unchecked power, whether through recklessness or obsession with control. After diving into the lives, ambitions, and powers of Morgoth and Sauron, we arrive at the question that has intrigued Middle-earth fans for decades. Who truly deserves the title of Ultimate Dark Lord? Both left marks of profound darkness on the world, and both sought dominion, but through vastly different paths and with contrasting impacts on Middle-earth. In the end, the legacy of each remains powerful, casting long shadows over all the ages. Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, the source of all evil. Morgoth's influence was unparalleled in sheer magnitude. As Melkor, the most powerful of the Valar, he was created with abilities far beyond those of any other being in Arda. From the very beginning, he sought dominion not just over the lands and people, but over the essence of creation itself. His corruption ran deep, tainting the world with darkness that would outlast him. His malice was scattered throughout Arda. He transformed beauty into horror, peace into war. And his twisted creations, such as the orcs, balrogs, and dragons, continued to wreak havoc long after his banishment. It was Morgoth who left scars upon Arda that could never be healed. The very fabric of Middle-earth bears traces of his influence, from the cursed lands to the creatures he created. His malice spread into the soil, the creatures, and the very lifeblood of the world, creating a legacy of fear that would last beyond his defeat. In many ways, Morgoth was the true father of all evils in Middle-earth. Even after he was exiled into the void, his shadow lingered, a dark heritage that became the foundation upon which Sauron later built his own power. Sauron, the lieutenant turned Dark Lord of Middle-earth. Yet Sauron's evil was a different force entirely. As Morgoth's lieutenant, he learned the arts of deception, subjugation, and manipulation. But after Morgoth's fall, Sauron evolved his own methods, focusing not just on brute force, but on subtlety and seduction. Sauron's greatest weapon was his mind and his ability to influence the hearts and ambitions of others. Unlike Morgoth, who wished to destroy, Sauron sought to rule. His empire was meticulously structured, his plans far-reaching, and his desire for order almost obsessive. Through the One Ring, Sauron demonstrated his unparalleled skill at bending others to his will. His influence reached beyond armies and lands, deep into the hearts of elves, men, and other beings across Middle-earth. He instilled fear not merely by force, but through temptation, using his understanding of each race's desires to spread his power. The impact of his dominion was perhaps narrower in scope than Morgoth's, yet it ran deeper, a darkness that could corrupt even the most noble of hearts. Where Morgoth was a violent storm, Sauron was a creeping shadow, the legacy of their darkness. Morgoth's ambitions, while vast, were his undoing. His unrestrained desire for control over all things led him to disperse his power, investing it in his creatures, his lands, and his corruptions. This ultimately weakened him, making him vulnerable to the combined might of the Valar and the free peoples in the War of Wrath. In the end, his defeat was final, and his essence was cast into the void, though his shadow remained as a lingering darkness upon Middle-earth. Morgoth's downfall was inevitable, for he could not contain the extent of his own malice. Sauron, in contrast, channeled his power into the One Ring, which, while ultimately his downfall, allowed him to concentrate his strength. His return after Morgoth's fall, his corruption of Numenor, his influence over Middle-earth's most powerful realms, these were feats of strategic genius that Morgoth never could have accomplished. Sauron's ambition was more controlled, and his rule more effective and insidious, leaving a psychological scar upon Middle-earth. His impact endured even after his final defeat, as his shadow continued to linger in legends and fears. Who holds the title of Ultimate Dark Lord? Both Morgoth and Sauron represent unique and profound forms of evil. Morgoth's power was raw and elemental, and he corrupted Arda itself, making him the Dark Father of all evil in Middle-earth. His influence on the very essence of the world was unmatched, and his downfall marked the end of a devastating era. Morgoth was a towering force, a god of corruption who sought nothing less than the total enslavement and destruction of all life. Sauron, however, may be seen as the more effective Dark Lord, if effectiveness is measured by strategic prowess, the breadth of influence, and the depth of fear instilled in his enemies. His use of subtlety and his mastery of deceit allowed him to corrupt entire realms, manipulating even the wisest and noblest of beings. Sauron's methods proved harder to resist and eradicated, lingering in the hearts of Middle-earth's people long after his final defeat. Ultimately, Morgoth and Sauron were two sides of the same dark coin. Where Morgoth wielded his evil like a hammer, Sauron used it like a knife. In this sense, Morgoth was the original Dark Lord, the raw, chaotic source of evil, while Sauron became the quintessential Dark Lord of control and deception. They left legacies that intertwined, with Sauron emerging as Morgoth's spiritual successor, wielding darkness with a precision that Morgoth never achieved. As we conclude this journey into Middle-earth's greatest evils, the question remains, what other dark powers lurked in the shadows? While Morgoth and Sauron were the most infamous, other figures, such as the Witch King of Angmar and the monstrous Ungoliant, left their marks on Middle-earth as well. These lesser-known entities, born from the same darkness, reveal yet more layers to Tolkien's vision of evil. For those captivated by Middle-earth's darker legends, stay tuned to Tales of the Ring as we delve into the lives of other enigmatic characters who shaped Arda's history. We'll continue to explore the mysteries, the forgotten histories, and the dark figures who left indelible marks on Tolkien's world. Thank you for joining us, and if you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Leave your opinion in the comments. Would Sauron be crueler than Morgoth himself? Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers and be part of this quest to uncover Middle-earth's most hidden lore.
Entdeck die Liebe für Gemüse mit dem Geschmack, was verdient. Nur auf Paramount Plus.
What ancient secrets lie buried beneath the cold, forgotten tombs of Arnor? The once great northern kingdom of men, now lost to the mists of time, still holds mysteries that have yet to be unraveled. Buried with its kings are not just crowns and swords, but perhaps treasures of far greater significance, relics from Numenor, and maybe even powers that should have remained hidden. But what exactly was sealed in these tombs? And why have they been left to decay, forgotten by the world? Welcome to Tales of the Ring, where we uncover the lost legends of Tolkien's Middle-earth. Today, we'll journey through the ancient tombs of Arnor, exploring the mysteries and forgotten lore that surround these burial places. Were the kings of Arnor buried with powerful relics, or have dark forces corrupted these ancient resting places? Before we dive in, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support allows us to keep exploring the incredible depths of Tolkien's world. Now, let's venture back to a time when the kingdom of Arnor was at the height of its power, and the tombs of its kings were more than just resting places. They were repositories of history, treasures, and perhaps even danger. What was lost in these tombs, and how does it continue to shape Middle-earth, even in the Third Age? To understand the mystery of the forgotten tombs of Arnor, we must first look back to the kingdom's founding and the rich history that gave birth to these sacred resting places. Arnor was not just another realm in Middle-earth. It was born from the ashes of Numenor, a legacy of the Dunedain, the descendants of the greatest of men. The founding of Arnor. In the Second Age, the kingdom of Numenor was the pinnacle of human achievement, a powerful island nation blessed by the Valar and given a long life. But Numenor's downfall was inevitable, brought about by the corruption of Sauron and the hubris of its rulers. In its final, catastrophic days, a group of loyal Númenóreans, led by Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion, fled the destruction of their homeland. They sailed across the sea and established the realms of Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. Elendil, the father of the line of kings that would stretch into the Third Age, became the first High King of both Arnor and Gondor, ruling from the northern capital of Annúminas on the shores of Lake Avendin. It was here, in the northern reaches of Middle-earth, that the Dunedain sought to preserve the wisdom and glory of Númenor, establishing a kingdom that mirrored the grandeur of their lost homeland. Arnor and Gondor were sister kingdoms, both founded on Númenórean principles, and both striving to maintain the greatness of their ancestors. But Arnor, more than Gondor, became the repository of Númenórean traditions and wisdom. The northern Dunedain were the keepers of ancient knowledge, holding dear to the values of their forefathers and the sacred relics brought from the ruins of Númenor. Arnor's early rise to power. Under Elendil and his descendants, Arnor grew into a powerful and prosperous kingdom. Its capital, Annúminas, was a marvel of Númenórean architecture, with tall towers, wide streets, and great halls where the Dunedain kings ruled in wisdom. The royal lineage of Arnor was directly descended from the faithful Númenóreans, and this connection to the greatest of men gave the northern kingdom immense prestige and influence in Middle-earth. The Dunedain of Arnor were a proud people, and they viewed their kingdom as the true successor of Númenor, a place where the ancient traditions of their lost homeland could be preserved. While Gondor was more concerned with expanding its military and political influence, Arnor was a land of scholars, historians, and artisans. The northern Dunedain sought to keep alive the memory of Númenor through their architecture, their learning, and their reverence for the past. But it was not just the living who were honored in Arnor. The kings of Arnor understood the importance of preserving their history, and thus began the tradition of building royal tombs, sacred places where the rulers of the kingdom would be laid to rest alongside relics of their Númenórean heritage. These tombs were not merely graves. They were monuments to the enduring legacy of Númenor, places where the knowledge and treasures of the ancient world could be protected for future generations.
Endlich bin ich an der Reihe.
Ich bin unsterblich, solange bis ich euch und euresgleichen von dieser Welt getilgt habe.
Neu, Toblerone Pralines in Diamantform. Feinste Schokolade mit einer zart knusprigen Nougatfüllung.
The Tombs of Arnor, a legacy of Númenor. The royal tombs of Arnor, scattered across the kingdom in places of great significance, were built with the express purpose of honoring the dead kings and preserving the artifacts they brought with them from Númenor. These tombs were filled with relics, ancient swords, shields, crowns, and scrolls that traced their lineage back to the Lost Island Kingdom. Some of these items were said to hold great power, artifacts tied to the downfall of Númenor or the early wars against Sauron. Among the most significant of these burial sites were the tombs located in the Barrow Downs, the Hill of Evendon, and near Fornost, the seat of the later kings. Each tomb was a solemn reminder of the greatness that Arnor once held, and the responsibility of the Dunedain to protect and honor the legacy of Númenor. The burial sites were often sealed with ancient spells and runes, designed to protect the treasures within from those who might seek to use them for ill. However, as Arnor's strength began to fade, so too did the knowledge and respect for these tombs. They became places of mystery and danger, as the relics within were no longer watched over by the descendants of Elendil. Over time, the royal tombs fell into obscurity, their locations forgotten by most. Yet, legends persisted, whispered tales of cursed treasures and dark forces that guarded these ancient sites. The growing shadow over Arnor. Despite its early power, Arnor's fate was not to last. The kingdom was not immune to the machinations of evil, and in the centuries that followed Elendil's rule, Arnor fell into decline. Rivalries between the descendants of the kings led to internal division, and eventually the kingdom split into three smaller realms: Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor. This division weakened Arnor, making it vulnerable to external threats, chief among them the rise of Angmar and the Witch King. As Arnor's power waned, its kings continued to be buried in the tombs of their ancestors, but the glory and prestige of these burial sites faded with the kingdom's fortunes. What had once been a land of scholars and wisdom became a shadow of its former self, with ancient tombs abandoned and left to the elements. Yet, while the kings of Arnor faded into history, the treasures buried with them remained, locked away in tombs that few dared to enter. Some say the spirits of the dead kings still guard these sites, bound to protect the relics of Númenor from any who would seek to claim them. Others whisper of darker forces, curses placed upon the tombs to ensure that the treasures within never see the light of day again. Why do the tombs matter? The tombs of Arnor are not just graves, they are repositories of history, places where the last vestiges of Numenor's greatness were laid to rest. These burial sites, now shrouded in mystery, contain some of the most significant relics of Middle-earth's ancient past. As we continue our journey, we'll explore the downfall of Arnor and the curses that now guard the tombs, and ask the question, what might still lie within these forgotten tombs? The fall of Arnor was not a sudden event, but the result of internal strife and external threats that slowly eroded the kingdom's power. From its founding as a strong and unified realm under the line of Elendil, Arnor held great promise. But in the years that followed, it fell into division, and this division ultimately led to its downfall. The division of Arnor. After the death of Eärendil, the last king of a united Arnor, his sons fell into bitter conflict over the right to the throne. This civil war splintered the kingdom into three smaller and weaker realms: Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor. Each kingdom claimed legitimacy as the true successor of Arnor, but in truth, this division only weakened them all. What had once been a mighty kingdom descended from Numenor was now fractured, and each of the three kingdoms struggled for survival. Arthedain, the northernmost of the three, retained the line of Elendil and was the strongest of the three successor states, though it faced growing threats on all sides. Cardolan, to the south, controlled much of the region near the Barrow Downs and Tirn Gorthad, where many of the ancient kings of Arnor had been buried. Rudor, the easternmost realm, fell into corruption quickly. It was in Rudor that the shadow of evil began to grow, as the hillmen of the region rose to power and darker forces began to take hold. Though they shared a common heritage, the three kingdoms were plagued by distrust and rivalry, each seeking to establish dominance over the others. But this internal conflict left them vulnerable to an external enemy, one that had been waiting in the shadows to strike. The rise of Angmar and the Witch King. As Arnor descended into civil war, a new and terrible threat arose in the north. In the land of Angmar, a realm of dark sorcery and evil, the Witch King established his throne. The Witch King, the chief servant of Sauron, had been sent to the north with a singular purpose: to destroy the Dunedain of Arnor and pave the way for Sauron's return to power. Angmar was a kingdom built on fear and dark magic, and under the Witch King's rule, it became a force of relentless aggression. From his stronghold in Carndun, the Witch King launched brutal campaigns against the divided kingdoms of Arnor. He exploited their disunity, striking at each in turn, weakening them and driving them to the brink of ruin. Rudor, already corrupted from within, fell quickly to the Witch King's influence. The hillmen, who had seized power in the region, allied themselves with Angmar, betraying the Dunedain of Arnor. Rudor's fall was swift and devastating, and it soon became a vassal of the Witch King. Cardolan, though more resilient, could not withstand the full might of Angmar's forces. The Barrow Downs, once a place of reverence for the ancient kings of Arnor, were overrun, and dark spirits, Barrow-wights, began to haunt the tombs of Cardolan's fallen kings. Arthedain, the strongest of the three kingdoms, held out the longest against the Witch King's assaults. But even Arthedain with its rich heritage and the line of Elendil, could not stand alone forever. The Witch King's relentless warfare, combined with Arthedain's isolation, slowly wore the kingdom down. As Angmar's power grew, so too did the shadow over Arnor. The Witch King's hatred for the Dunedain knew no bounds, and his ultimate goal was the complete destruction of their lineage. The once great kingdom of Arnor, weakened by its own internal struggles, was no match for the combined forces of Angmar's sorcery and its armies of orcs, hillmen, and other dark creatures. The fall of Arnor. In the year 1974 of the Third Age, the final blow was struck. Arthedain, the last remnant of Arnor, fell to the Witch King's armies in the Battle of Fornost. Fornost, the capital of Arthedain, was overrun, and the Dunedain who survived were scattered. Their power broken, the North Kingdom, as it had once been known, was no more. The Witch King had achieved his goal, leaving the tombs of Arnor's kings abandoned and unprotected. The tombs, once places of honor and reverence, became desolate. With the fall of the kingdom, the royal burial sites were left untended, their treasures and relics hidden beneath the earth, slowly fading from memory. In the Barrow Downs, where many of the kings of Cardolan were buried, a great darkness began to fester. The Barrow Wights, sent by the Witch King himself, took residence in the mounds, guarding the tombs with malevolent purpose. But while the tombs of the kings lay forgotten, the artifacts and relics buried with them remained. It is said that powerful heirlooms of Numenor, ancient swords, and even scrolls of great wisdom were buried with the kings of Arnor, awaiting the day when they might be rediscovered, or perhaps never to be found at all. The legacy of Arnor's fall. Though Arnor had fallen, its legacy lived on in the Dunedain who survived the collapse. The remnants of the kingdom's people became the Rangers of the North, led by the descendants of the royal line. These Rangers continued to guard the northern lands, watching over the ancient sites of Arnor, including its forgotten tombs. But the tombs themselves, left in ruins, became places of mystery and fear. Few dared to venture near the Barrow Downs, where the Wights roamed freely, and even fewer sought the tombs near Fornost or the Hill of Evendim, where relics of the kings might still lie hidden. The kingdom of Arnor, once a beacon of Numenorian wisdom and power, had faded into obscurity, its tombs left behind as silent witnesses to the greatness and tragedy of the past. The fall of Arnor set the stage for the Third Age, a time in which the kingdoms of men were diminished, and the power of Sauron grew ever stronger. Yet, the secrets of Arnor's tombs continued to linger, their contents and their curses waiting to be uncovered by those bold enough to seek them out. As the kingdom of Arnor crumbled under the relentless assaults of Angmar and the treacheries of internal division, the final days of the kings of the north were marked by desperation and sorrow. Yet, even as the kingdom's power waned, the traditions of their Numenorian heritage persisted, particularly in how they honored their dead. The kings of Arnor, though their realm lay in ruins, were buried with great reverence alongside the ancient relics they had inherited from Numenor. The Barrow Downs, tombs of kings and wights, among the most famous and mysterious of these royal burial sites were the Barrow Downs, or Tirn Gorthad. Located south of Fornost, this eerie region was once a sacred place where the kings of Cardolan, and other noble Dunedain were laid to rest. The Barrow Downs, with their rolling hills and ancient mounds, were seen as a place of reverence for the dead. Here, in the quiet solitude of the hills, the kings were buried with their swords, shields, and other relics, symbols of their rule and of their Númenórean ancestry. The Barrow Mounds themselves were ancient.
Energieversorger wollen nicht, dass du diesen Trick kennst, mit dem du Häuser fast kostenlos heizen kannst. Hört mal gut zu, Leute. Diese bahnbrechende Erfindung hält dich warm, ohne ein Vermögen zu kosten. Es kann in Sekundenschnelle die Wärme in jedem Raum erhöhen und das Beste daran, es verbraucht kaum Energie. Ja, du hast richtig gehört. Dieses Gerät ist fast 98% effizienter als die alten, klobigen Heizungen, die wir schon ewig benutzen. Diese clevere Methode, dein Zuhause zu heizen, ist anders als alles, was du bisher gesehen hast. Dieses Gerät revolutioniert die Art und Weise, wie Menschen warm bleiben, und es hört nicht auf. Einfach einstecken, den Schalter umlegen und innerhalb von Sekunden wird dein Raum kuschelig warm. Es ist leicht, leise und super einfach zu bedienen. Ob Wohnzimmer, Schlafzimmer oder sogar das Badezimmer. Dieser Heizkörper ist für alles geeignet. Entworfen wurde es von Marek Mattis, einem echten Profi in der Welt der Jettechnologie, mit über 20 Jahren Erfahrung in Spitzentechnologie. Marek wuchs in einem kleinen Dorf nahe der tschechischen Grenze auf, wo die Winter unglaublich hart sind. Wir sprechen von -4 Grad eisiger Kälte. Aufgezogen von seinen Großeltern sah er aus erster Hand, wie schwer es für sie war, warm zu bleiben, ohne viel Geld auszugeben. Diese Winter waren kein Spaß und die Heizkosten durch die Decke. Als die Energiepreise explodierten, wusste Marek, dass es Zeit war, etwas zu unternehmen. Mit seinem tiefen Wissen über Jetmotoren und dem genialen Bernoulli-Prinzip entwickelte er ein Gerät, das eine kontinuierliche Wärmeschleife erzeugt. Dieses Gerät recycelt die Wärme, anstatt sie entweichen zu lassen, und macht es dadurch extrem effizient. Und das Ergebnis? Schlichtweg unglaublich. Er nahm einen eiskalten Raum von -3 Grad auf 22 Grad in nur 2 Minuten. Und das mit 90% weniger Energie als jede herkömmliche Heizung. Die Neuigkeiten verbreiteten sich schnell, und bevor er sich versah, standen Investoren Schlange, um mehr als 3 Millionen Euro zu investieren und dieses bahnbrechende Heizgerät auf den Markt zu bringen. Und so entstand EcoWarm. Nach der erfolgreichen Gestaltung brachte Marek EcoWarm auf den Markt, und das erste Produktionslos war in nur 15 Minuten ausverkauft. Seitdem ist die Nachfrage enorm gestiegen. Die Leute sind begeistert, und das aus gutem Grund. Es ist die ultimative Möglichkeit, warm zu bleiben und diesen Winter viel Geld bei den Energiekosten zu sparen. Jetzt habe ich gute Nachrichten und schlechte Nachrichten für dich. Die guten Nachrichten: Marek bietet 50% Rabatt auf EcoWarm für die nächsten 5000 Menschen an, die die Website besuchen, weil er so vielen Menschen wie möglich helfen möchte, die Kälte zu überstehen, ohne ein Vermögen auszugeben. Die schlechten Nachrichten: Diese Geräte sind heiß begehrt und es sind nur noch wenige Einheiten verfügbar. Wenn du also warm bleiben und deine Energiekosten drastisch senken möchtest, besuche die offizielle Website, um deinen 50%igen Rabatt zu sichern. Achtung vor billigen Nachahmungen auf Amazon und Temu. EcoWarm ist nur über die offizielle Website erhältlich. Und das Beste, die Gründer sind so überzeugt von dieser genialen Erfindung, dass sie eine 30-Tage-Geld-Zurück-Garantie anbieten, ohne Fragen zu stellen. Aber warte nicht zu lange, dieses Angebot wird nicht ewig verfügbar sein. Mit den steigenden Energiepreisen kommen jede Minute neue Bestellungen rein. Besuche die offizielle Website und hol dir deinen 50%igen Rabatt, bevor sie alle weg sind.
Even by the standards of Middle-earth. Long before the Dunedain came to Arnor, the land had been inhabited by earlier peoples who had buried their dead in these mounds. When the Dunedain arrived, they consecrated the Barrow Downs as a royal burial site, creating new tombs for their fallen kings and lords. Each barrow was marked by a great stone, engraved with the name of the ruler entombed within, and sealed with ancient runes meant to protect the dead. But the Barrow Downs, once a place of honor and sacred memory, became twisted by the dark power of the Witch King of Angmar. As the Witch King's forces conquered Cardolan and ravaged the north, he sent evil spirits into the Barrow Mounds to possess the bodies of the dead kings. These spirits became the Barrow Wights, malevolent creatures bound to guard the tombs and ensnare any who dared enter. The Barrow Downs, once a peaceful resting place, became a place of terror where the dead did not rest easy, and few dared venture. Legend tells of great treasures buried within these mounds. Blades of Númenórean steel, golden armor, and even scrolls containing long-forgotten wisdom. But with the arrival of the Barrow Wights, the treasures were left to rot in the dark, guarded by spirits who sought to capture the living and pull them into their endless nightmare. The Barrow Downs became a haunted place, avoided even by the Rangers of the North, who still sought to protect the land from evil. The Hill of Vendham, resting place of kings. Another location steeped in mystery is the Hill of Evendom, or Amon Sul, situated near the northern shores of Lake Evendom, close to the ruins of the ancient capital, Anuminas. This hill was said to be one of the most hallowed burial sites in Arnor, where several kings of the Dunedain were laid to rest, along with relics from the days of Númenor, while the Barrow Downs held the kings of Cardolan and other lords. The Hill of Evendom was reserved for the kings of Arthedain, the final stronghold of Arnor's royal line. The tombs on the Hill of Evendom were said to be grand and elaborate, carved deep into the earth, with great stone doors that were sealed with powerful enchantments. The artifacts buried with these kings were believed to include some of the most precious heirlooms of the Dunedain, gifts from Númenor given to Elendil and his descendants, and passed down through the line of kings. These relics, it is said, held not only historical value but also power, blades that could still cut through the flesh of evil creatures, or rings that enhanced the wearer's strength and wisdom. However, as Arnor fell into ruin and the northern lands became a wilderness, these tombs were abandoned, and the knowledge of their exact locations was lost to time. Some believe that the Rangers of the North, descendants of the Dunedain, still know the secret paths to the Hill of Evendom and watch over the tombs in secret. But others claim that the tombs have been left open to the elements, their treasures plundered by tomb raiders or swallowed by the wild magic of the north. The Hill of Evendom, now a place of ruins, is rarely visited. The tombs, if they still exist, are covered by centuries of overgrowth, hidden by the natural landscape and the passage of time. Yet, legends persist that deep within the hill, there may still lie ancient relics, items of great power, waiting to be discovered. The growing presence of dark magic. As the power of Arnor faded and the tombs were forgotten, the forces of darkness began to creep into these once sacred places. With the rise of Angmar and the Witch King's conquest of the north, the tombs of the kings became sites of dark magic. The Barrow Wights were only the beginning. It is said that other shadowy figures began to roam the land, drawn to the ancient power buried within the tombs. In the Barrow Downs, the presence of the Barrow Wights is a testament to the enduring curse placed on the region by the Witch King. These spirits, bound to the tombs, are said to be able to trap any who venture too close. Once captured, the living are forced into a death-like slumber. Trapped in a barrow, surrounded by the bones of the long-dead kings. Those few who survive encounters with the Barrow-wights speak of visions of darkness, cold, and an overpowering sense of dread. In the regions around Fornost and the hill of Evendim, there are tales of phantoms wandering the hills at night, protecting the tombs of the ancient kings. These figures, shrouded in darkness, are said to be the spirits of the Dunedain kings themselves, who remain bound to their relics even in death. Some believe that the Witch King's influence still lingers in these areas, corrupting the spirits of the dead and transforming them into something dark and malevolent. As time passed, even the Rangers of the North began to avoid these areas, fearful of the evil that had taken hold. The once revered tombs of Arnor's kings became places of darkness, filled with dangerous magic and guarded by spirits who knew no rest. The treasures buried with the kings, if they still exist, remain untouched, locked away by powers beyond the reach of mortals. The mystery of the tombs. What exactly lies within the forgotten tombs of Arnor? Some claim that the relics of Numenor, items of great power and mystery, are still buried deep within these mounds, waiting for the right time or the right person to claim them. Others believe that the tombs have been cursed by the Witch King, their contents sealed away forever to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. But there are also those who whisper of even darker secrets hidden within the tombs, forbidden knowledge, weapons of unspeakable power, and ancient scrolls that could change the fate of Middle-earth. Whatever the truth may be, the tombs of Arnor remain one of the greatest mysteries of the North, shrouded in darkness and guarded by forces that few dare to challenge. The tombs of Arnor are not merely relics of the past. They are places steeped in mystery and legend, where the line between history and myth blurs. The ancient kings of Arnor, descended from the Dunedain of Numenor, were buried with great reverence, alongside heirlooms of their people. These were not simple trinkets. Some were powerful artifacts passed down through generations, each with a story and a legacy of its own. But as the tombs were abandoned and left to the forces of darkness, these items have become the subject of speculation and fear. The lost relics of Arnor. Among the most tantalizing possibilities is the idea that some of the great relics of Numenor still lie buried within the forgotten tombs of Arnor. These items, which had been brought by Elendil and his people during their escape from the destruction of Numenor, are believed to hold tremendous power. Some say that these relics were enchanted with the wisdom of the Valar, meant to guide the Dunedain in their struggles against the forces of evil. Many believe that some of the tombs contain ancient weapons, swords forged with the might of Numenorian steel, capable of cutting through the shadowy forms of the Witch King's servants. These blades, though long buried, are said to retain their edge and power, waiting for the day when a worthy hand will once again wield them in the battle against darkness. There are also rumors of rings and jewels, imbued with magical properties, that lie hidden beneath the earth. Objects that, if found, could change the fate of Middle-earth. Perhaps most intriguing are the legends of scrolls and books that were sealed away with the kings, containing lost knowledge from the time of Numenor. These writings are said to hold secrets of ancient magic and wisdom that have been long forgotten, Some say that these scrolls could reveal the hidden weaknesses of Sauron, or even the means to counter the power of the One Ring. Others believe that such knowledge is too dangerous, and that the kings of Arnor buried it with them to ensure that it would never be found. Yet, while these relics are the subject of endless speculation, few have ever dared to enter the tombs in search of them. The curses that guard these ancient resting places are well known, and those who disturb the dead often find themselves trapped in a nightmare from which they cannot escape. The curses of the tombs. Throughout the centuries, tales of adventurers and treasure hunters who sought the tombs of Arnor have spread across Middle-earth. Some were driven by greed, others by the hope of finding long-lost knowledge. But almost all of these stories end in tragedy. The tombs, it is said, are not meant to be disturbed, and those who do so often pay the ultimate price. One of the most infamous of these tombs lies in the Barrow Downs, where the Barrow Wights guard the resting places of the kings of Cardolan. The Witch King of Angmar, in his conquest of the north, cursed these barrows, sending evil spirits to possess the mounds and entrap any who dared enter. These Barrow Wights are malevolent beings, capable of inducing a deathly sleep in those they capture, trapping their victims in a twilight between life and death. Many who have sought the treasures of the Barrow Downs have never returned, their bodies claimed by the Wights and their souls lost to darkness. Those few who have escaped tell of the cold that fills the tombs, of whispers in the dark, and of the overwhelming sense of dread that presses down on any who enter. It is said that the Barrow Wights can sense greed and fear, and that once they have claimed a victim, they will not let them go until they are entombed forever. But the Barrow Downs are not the only tombs said to be cursed. In the northern reaches, near the hill of Avendim, there are stories of phantoms that guard the tombs of the kings of Arthedain. These spirits, unlike the Barrow Wights, are said to be the restless souls of the kings themselves, bound to their ancient relics and driven by a need to protect their heritage from any who would seek to plunder it. Some claim that these phantoms are benevolent, watching over the tombs to ensure that the items of power within remain safe. Others say that these spirits are twisted by sorrow and madness, and that they will destroy any who approach their resting places. The hobbits and the Barrow Wights. The dark power that lingers in the tombs of Arnor is not merely the stuff of legend. It still affects the lands of Middle-earth even in the Third Age. One of the most notable encounters with the forces that haunt these tombs occurs in the Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin unwittingly wander into the Barrow Downs and fall into the hands of the Barrow Wights. As they make their way through the mists and fog that cover the Barrow Downs, the hobbits are separated and captured by the Wights, who take them deep into one of the tombs. Inside the barrow, the hobbits are placed in a death-like trance, surrounded by treasures, golden rings, swords, and armor that had once belonged to the kings of Arnor. The Wight prepares to sacrifice them, but Frodo, gathering his courage, calls out to Tom Bombadil, who comes to their rescue. This encounter is significant not only because it demonstrates the lingering curse on the tombs, but also because it shows that the treasures buried within still hold power. Among the items that the hobbits discover in the barrow is a sword of Númenórean make, which is later revealed to be one of the few weapons capable of harming the Witch King of Angmar. This blade, which had been lost for centuries, plays a crucial role in the defeat of the Witch King during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. The hobbits' encounter with the Barrow-wights serves as a reminder that the tombs of Arnor are not simply relics of a forgotten age. They are places where the past continues to influence the present. The dark forces that took root in these tombs during the fall of Arnor have not been vanquished. They still linger, waiting for the unwary to stumble into their grasp. The tomb's influence on the Third Age. Though the kingdom of Arnor has long since faded into memory, the legacy of its tombs continues to cast a shadow over the lands of the north. The relics buried with the kings of Arnor, whether they are swords, scrolls, or other powerful items, remain lost to time, hidden beneath the earth, guarded by curses and dark magic. Yet, as the War of the Ring looms over Middle-earth, the potential for these relics to be rediscovered becomes all the more important. Some believe that the Rangers of the North, descendants of the Dunedain, still know of these tombs and protect them from being desecrated. Others fear that the servants of Sauron may one day seek to reclaim the treasures buried within, using them to bolster their master's power. Whatever the case, the tombs of Arnor remain a haunting mystery, a link to the ancient world of Númenor, and a reminder of the tragedy that befell the North. As the Third Age comes to a close, the tombs of Arnor continue to hold their secrets. Whether those secrets will ever be revealed, or whether they are best left undisturbed, remains a question for those who dare to seek them. The forgotten tombs of Arnor remain one of the greatest mysteries of Middle-earth, their contents and significance shrouded in both history and myth. What relics, if any, still lie buried with the kings of the ancient Northern Kingdom? Could these tombs hold powerful artifacts from the Second Age, treasures tied to the rise and fall of Númenor, or even items that could influence the Third Age and beyond? Historical importance of the tombs. The tombs of Arnor, especially those located in the Barrow Downs and on the Hill of Avendim, are not simply graves. They are repositories of Arnor's rich legacy. These burial sites connect the Dunedain directly to their Númenórean ancestry, preserving the heritage and power of the greatest men to walk Middle-earth. Many of the items buried with the kings of Arnor were likely brought across the sea from Númenor by Elendil and his descendants, making them relics not only of a great kingdom, but of an entire civilization lost beneath the waves. Historians and lore masters of Middle-earth have long speculated that within these tombs lie weapons of Númenórean craftsmanship, blades forged in the fires of Númenor that could still be wielded in the defense of the free peoples. We know from the tale of Frodo and the hobbits that ancient swords were indeed buried within the Barrow Downs, some of which retained the power to harm creatures of shadow, like the Witch King of Angmar. What other weapons, long forgotten and untouched by time, might still lie beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to be discovered? Beyond weapons, there may be heirlooms that trace back to the earliest days of the Dunedain, crowns, rings, and other items that hold both historical and magical significance. Such objects, if found, could provide a direct link to the time of Elendil and the founding of the realms in exile. For the Rangers of the North, the descendants of Arnor's royal line, these artifacts could serve as a powerful symbol of their forgotten heritage, potentially uniting the scattered remnants of the Dunedain in the face of rising evil. Connections to Sauron and the dark forces of Angmar. But the tombs of Arnor are not only filled with the relics of light, they are also tainted by darkness. As the Witch King of Angmar waged war against the divided kingdoms of Arnor, he sent evil spirits into the royal tombs to desecrate them, turning places of honor into cursed prisons for the dead. The Barrow Wights that now inhabit the Barrow Downs are a testament to the enduring power of the Witch King's magic, suggesting that the tombs may hold even greater secrets tied to the dark forces that once plagued the North. Could some of the relics buried with the kings of Arnor have been corrupted by the Witch King, or even linked to Sauron himself? The Witch King, as Sauron's greatest servant, would have sought to weaken Arnor, not only through military might, but through the corruption of its very soul. It's possible that some of the ancient relics in the tombs were tainted during the wars with Angmar, their power twisted into something dangerous and unpredictable. For those who seek these tombs, the risk is immense. It's not only the Barrow Wights that they must contend with, but the potential for encountering artifacts that have been cursed or imbued with dark magic. These items, if found, could either be used as weapons against the Free Peoples, or worse, could fall into the hands of Sauron's servants, further tipping the balance of power in the struggle for Middle-earth's future. Influence on the future of Middle-earth. The tombs of Arnor continue to cast a long shadow over the Third Age and beyond. For the Dunedain, who have lived in the wilderness for generations, these tombs represent both a link to their glorious past and a warning of the dangers that come with pride and hubris. The Rangers of the North, descendants of Arnor's kings, are known to patrol the ancient sites, ensuring that the evil spirits within do not spread and that the relics remain undisturbed. Yet, the threat of these tombs is far from over. With the rise of Sauron in the Third Age and the gathering forces of darkness, the possibility that some of these artifacts might be uncovered and used becomes more real. If the heirlooms of Numenor or the cursed relics of the Witch King were to be found and wielded by the wrong hands, they could pose a significant threat to the free peoples of Middle-earth. At the same time, the potential for good also exists. Should the Rangers or other guardians of Middle-earth uncover these relics, they could be used in the defense against the forces of Mordor. Just as the sword found by Merry in the Barrow Downs became instrumental in the defeat of the Witch King, other weapons and items of power might serve to turn the tide in the final battles against Sauron. In the end, the tombs of Arnor are a reminder of the fragile balance between light and darkness that defines Middle-earth. They represent the past, both in terms of the greatness of Numenor and the fall of Arnor, but they also hold the potential to influence the future. Whether these tombs remain undisturbed, or whether their secrets are one day revealed, will have a lasting impact on the world of men and their struggle against the forces of evil. The forgotten tombs of Arnor stand as silent witnesses to a once great kingdom, now buried beneath the weight of time and ruin. Within their depths may lie treasures of immense power, relics of Numenor, ancient weapons, and knowledge that could reshape Middle-earth. But with these treasures come curses and dark forces that have lingered since the fall of the kingdom, left behind by the Witch King of Angmar and his relentless war against the Dunedain. These tombs, though long neglected, hold a significant place in the history of Middle-earth. They are the last vestiges of Arnor's glory, a reminder of the fragile balance between pride and downfall. The artifacts buried with the kings represent not only the legacy of Numenor, but also the sorrow of a kingdom that could not withstand the forces of division and evil. The treasures within may never be found, but their presence shapes the North in ways both seen and unseen. The downfall of Arnor, caused by internal strife and the rise of Angmar, left a lasting shadow over Middle-earth. The division of the kingdom and the rise of the Witch King weakened the Dunedain, scattering them into the wilderness and leaving their tombs abandoned and cursed. Yet the legacy of Arnor lives on in the Rangers of the North, who still guard the ancient sites, ever wary of the dark magic that lingers in the tombs of their forefathers. As we've explored, the mysteries and legends surrounding these tombs continue to intrigue and haunt those who dwell in the north. Are the relics of Numenor still buried beneath the earth, waiting to be rediscovered? Or have the dark forces that haunt these tombs rendered them forever lost? The influence of these tombs stretches into the present, shaping the future of Middle-earth in ways we may not yet fully understand. And so, the story of Arnor and its tombs is far from over. What other secrets lie hidden